Well, first of all, it's really an honor and a pleasure to be able to be on with you all as we are, talking about the world. Is much different than it was 6 months ago. Everyone was moving into the year 2020 with, cliches and statements and ideas about, a year of clear vision and all these types of things. And I think that the world was definitely given an unexpected shock and detour in how we did things, how we live our lives, how we serve families, how we educate our children, and everything else that we do in the world. And, before we jump right into this, I just want to take a moment just to hopefully encourage people. Although the world is very different, we have the ability to adjust and make the changes and nuance to how we operate with one another, and we can still be extremely successful. I know that especially in the area of special education, and as we're going to talk about transition here today, trying to figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life. Pre-COVID, pre-coronavirus was already challenging, but the situation we find ourselves in the world makes it a little more challenging on one hand, but it also opens up a new level of possibilities that we can use technology, that we can find ways of meeting with people right where they are, and do that in a really excellent and an effective way. And so I think this format that the staff and Jill and the staff and Wendy have come up with for these Zoom meetings and these sessions, that Mission Empower, I think, is a wonderful tool. And again, just want to be encouraging and let people know that might be different, but we can still be extremely successful in a different way and in this different time. So transition, and I think it's kind of not so much a play on words, but an interesting use of words. We want to talk today about young people that are in high school transitioning to life outside of high school, life after graduation, life in adulthood. In Pennsylvania, at least, in relation to special education, the transition process is ideally started in around 8th grade or so. I think a lot of educational systems are realizing that it should start even earlier, exposing students to different ideas and career ideas and opportunities that are out there, educational opportunities post high school. I think that's happening more and more in an early way, but for sure and definitely for students that are in special education, that 8th grade year is important. In that age of 14 in particular, they have to have a transition plan and a strategy. And so our talk today is just about that, like transition and planning the process for success, because the goal is to be successful. And whatever that level of success is, whatever that concept and idea of success is, it varies from person to person, but we all have an opportunity. They need to actually, as my mom used to say, you got to have a plan. And you have to have an opportunity and a plan to be successful. So we're going to talk about some of those things today and hopefully answer some questions and just kind of have a good and enjoyable time. All right, we will move to the next slide. And thank you, Wendy, for the alliteration of Wonderful Wednesdays with Wendy. That was hard to say 3 times really fast. I want to give a quick definition that came out of my head, not so much Webster or Google definitions or dictionary, but the process of a student identifying what they want to do after high school and then developing a plan to accomplish it. I think a lot of times we have young people and families that know what they want for their child, or that young person may on some level know what they want to do, but the missing link is to have a plan in place and a strategy in place to be able to accomplish it, and then have that plan to be flexible, so that when COVID type things happen or things that are less pandemic in nature happen, we can still adjust and be flexible and move towards the goal of success and whatever that looks like in our life. You can have the next slide, please. So the first thing I want us to do is, again, what's the plan? The concept that I want to share with you is that everything has to be en route to something else. We have to be not just doing things so much in a vacuum, but it's important to recognize as a young person who is getting closer and they're matriculating through high school, junior, senior year especially, it gets really real, really fast, whatever it is you want to do after high school. And part of the challenge is we have a lot of young people who are maybe planning, maybe strategizing, but often don't look to the place that's the most important. We look at job opportunities, look at schooling up or educational opportunities. We look at living situations and living opportunities, but we don't do something that's really important, I think, and that is a self-assessment. Michael Jackson, you know, pop artist extraordinaire, sang a song and said, "I'm talking about the man in the mirror," or the person in the mirror. And I think this is a very important process that we go through in the process of developing a plan and a strategy for the success that we want to see in our lives. So the self-assessment, I just hit a few of these points. And again, I'm talking, but you know, those of us that are on now, throw out and interject, please. It's not one way, it should be dialogue and we can go back and forth. So what do you like to do? That's important to understand what it is you like to do. And then the next question is, what are you good at? It's kind of interesting because they seem like they might be the same thing, but sometimes we really like things that we're not all the way good at yet. And so it's important to know what you like to do, and then also what are you good at. And once you start to identify what you're good at and what you like to do, then it's important for you to understand what do you see yourself doing, right? So there are things that I like to do, and even things that I'm good at, but it may not be what I want to do for the rest of my life. It may not be the career choice that I want to move forward in. I loved numbers and math and accounting when I was in high school. I was all about business administration. I started my first year of college at Teal, a business administration and accounting major, and then I actually started taking accounting classes, and the ledgers and the numbers started looking all crazy, and I just couldn't see myself doing that for the rest of my life. So what do you like to do? What are you good at? What do you see yourself doing in the future? Are important questions that you need to ask. We won't get too deep into this. I'm just kind of hitting each of these as bullet points. But what are your strengths, your weaknesses, the opportunities that you have, and the threats to your success? You have to analyze those things and look at them and realize that your strengths, that your weaknesses, you can work to convert those into strengths. Then also the threats, you can convert and work those into opportunities. And so I think that's important, and we can talk about that as well today or in future sessions. Also, what supports do you have in place? Do you have family supports? Do you have professional supports? Do you have educational supports or community supports? What things do you have or people do you have that can support you to help you reach that goal and those series of goals that you have to be successful in your life? And then conversely, what supports do you need? Sometimes we don't have all the things maybe tangibly in place or easily accessible that we need to be able to reach our goals. So you want to be able to assess what we do have in relation to supports, and then also what we don't have that we need to find a way to access and to gain those supports. Another thing I want to talk about is then developing a strategy. This is all part of answering the question of what's the plan. So again, let's go back. What do you have? What do you need? Who can help you as you're moving towards your goals and your success that you're striving for in life? And also, how can you connect with those folks, right? So sometimes you may have that person or those supports right there with you. Like I said, as I said before, what do you have in place? The things that you don't have in place, then you have to figure out, how do I access those things? How can I connect with those people? How can I connect with those systems or institutions that can help me and to move forward and help me to reach the goals that I am aspiring to? All right. And so again, this is a part of developing the strategy. You have to, in furthering the assessment of your situation so that you can know what it is you need to do so that you can be successful in the way that you want to be successful. Is that all right? I hope that makes sense. Is everybody good? Wonderful. The next thing that I want to talk about, I'll say part 3. In all of these phases and all of these component parts of identifying the plan and enacting the plan really run into each other and they overlap. The part 3 is you have to assess your resources, right? So sometimes you ask the question, what do I have? What don't I have? But then we have to start to drill down another level of specificity or be more specific and clear. And we just have to figure out what certain skills do I have. If I, once you're doing this self-assessment, again, what am I good at? What skills do I have? What can I offer to the world? Do those skills directly connect to what I see myself doing in the future? All right. What information do you have? Some students maybe want to go to a four-year college, but don't know and don't understand the FAFSA or the financial aid process or how to reach out to a college or university that they're interested in. Not only what skills do you have, but what information do you have? And then how do you get information that you may not have access to at this current time? Also, what items do you have, right? So maybe an item is technology. Do you have a laptop? Do you have access to an iPad? Do you have certain tangible items that are going to be able to be tools that you can use to help yourself as you move forward in the goals that you're trying and striving to accomplish? What people? There's certain people. We all have a lot of folks in our lives. We have a lot of folks in our world. But what people and what particular people do you have in your life that can be there, that are there, that can support you? Now, that doesn't mean that they know how to get you where you want to go. Some people are not in your life to be a tutor or a mentor in a particular area. They're simply there to be a support. There's like sometimes your mother may not know how to help you in a certain area. For me, when my children were coming up, all the educational world was changing. They had the new math and everything was on base 10 systems and all this different, moving into using technology in schools. I really couldn't help my children with that, but I definitely was there to support them and to encourage them and to help them to go to the places where they could get that support, that technical assistance, and that help. What people do you have in your life and what role can they play? And then here's something that often, if we're not careful, we'll look at or won't look at at all, or we'll look at in an adverse or negative way. What experiences have you had in your life? As I said before, sometimes we see things as weaknesses or threats, but really when we look at them from a different perspective, we can actually utilize them as strengths and we can utilize them as opportunities. So there's a philosopher that said, what hasn't killed you will make you stronger. What have you experienced? What certain experiences have you had or are you living in and having right now that are going to be able to strengthen you? It might not even seem as if it's related to your goal or where you want to go or what your transition plan is and your strategy post high school. But if you've been able to go through difficult family situations and still be successful in school, or if you're able to go through different challenges, and again, we're in this COVID world where we're secluded in our homes and limited access to people and limited access to things that we were very comfortable accessing in our communities. When those things happen, how do we grow from them? How can we use the experiences of life, not just the difficult, so-called difficult times, but also those successes? How do we take small wins? How do we take successful things en route to our grand level of success? How do we use those experiences to say, okay, I did it on a small scale, it worked this way, let me see how I can expand it and do it in a larger or more significant scale. And so those are some of the items and some of the things that I want us to continue to think about as we move forward. Perfect, Wendy, you got it. It's right there. On this slide that we're looking at right now, I intentionally selected and adjusted this photo or this graphic that's there on the previous slide that says resources. As you and I are assessing our resources, don't think that everything is going to be perfect and clear and all the way aligned smoothly. Even as you're looking at, you see the word or the bubble, it says resources, and that's very clear. It's in bold letters. We know we have resources. We know we need certain resources, but the peripheral or the connected bubbles, the list of resources is not very clear. The first one says technology, right? And so the way that it's set up is that it's the first half of the word is spelled, there's a hyphen, and then the second half of the word is spelled, and it's not clear. As you're assessing your resources, as you're assessing what things you have and need and ways you can get those things that you need that you don't have, it's going to be a little blurry. It's going to be a little unclear. But what's important, though, is it's unclear and it may not seem as you have the ability to kind of get it where you want it, just keep working it. I want to take this moment to say that everything will not go smoothly. Everything will not go perfectly. There will be some adjustments and nuances that have to be made in your process. And so what's happening is that when you are going through the process, when you're assessing yourself, when you're assessing and coming up with a strategy and a plan, when you're assessing the things that you have and don't have, when you're assessing your resources, it's important that you understand that flexibility is important. Flexibility is significant. And what you think about today, can I tell you, I'm 44 years old. I know I don't look it, for those of you that can see me, and I don't look 44, but I'm very much 44. But my world is so different. My mindset is so different than I was as a junior and senior. I was going to change the world. I was going to leave my Erie and go and get all this education and come back with all this education and money and change the world. And I was going to do all this stuff, and then life happens. Circumstances happen, situations happen, the world changed. And it didn't mean that I couldn't and wouldn't be successful, but what I thought success was in high school is much different than it was at 25, much different than it was at 35, and it is continuing to be different as I'm moving towards 45. And so I want you to know that you're always going to be assessing yourself, readjusting your strategy and your plan, and also readjusting and looking and expanding and sometimes adjusting or eliminating certain resources that you no longer need and adding resources that you need because of the time that you're in right now. So these are some things that I wanted to share with you in the strategy, and we're talking about transition. Transition is a great word for this process because you're moving to a place of dependence and often codependence with your family, with your parents, with your loved ones, with your caregivers, but you're transitioning into a place of being more independent. And it's important that we continue to be interdependent, meaning we have those resources, we have our family supports, we have folks around, but we have to take a much more commanding role in how our life is going to turn out. On the next slide, what I did was just threw out some ideas and options and opportunities and some of the things that young people and families may be thinking about for what they want to do and what they would like their child to participate in or fulfill in their life after high school. So I'll just read these real fast. Some people are absolutely looking at going right into the workforce. Some folks are looking at a 4-year college, some a 2-year college, some a trade school that is not affiliated with any particular college. Some are very interested in serving our country through the military. And I want to throw this one out here. Entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is a huge move. I mean, of course, people have been starting businesses and being entrepreneurs for years and years and generations and decades and even longer. But what we're finding now and what the world is finding is that what's moving things is individuals who are creative and are willing to kind of expand their comfort zone and get outside of the box of traditional business, traditional technology, and do something different, do something new, do something that maybe no one else has figured out how to do yet. And then another idea, and these are just a few that I came up with, is simply independent living. You know, depending on where you are, depending on your experiences as a young person, you might not be thinking about anything related to education beyond high school right now. You might just be wanting to figure out, okay, how do I get a job? How do I buy or rent my own apartment or whatever it is so I can live independently? How do I figure out how to budget so that I have enough money to pay my bills and to get the things that I need for my life, but also maybe have a little bit of money left over for some things that I like and I want to experience. Whatever area you're looking at that may be on this list or something that may not be on this list, everything that we've talked about up until this point it is important for you to go through that process of developing a plan. Again, whether you want to go into the workforce, 2 or 4 year college, trade school, military, all of those things, entrepreneurship, figuring out how you want to live and independent living, all of those things, you have to have a plan to accomplish and be successful at. So I wanted to just kind of throw out some ideas for you, throw out some conversation points for us to share as we move forward, because again, we can, at the end of the day, you might want to do 4 year college, but there is absolutely some self-assessment, some strategy, some planning that you have to do to be able to do that in a successful and in the smoothest way possible. All right, so let's move to the next slide. And this is kind of where we'll have some discussion and dialogue. So the previous, all my ranting and talking the last 15 minutes or so was kind of to get us in this space where we are now, so where we can talk and have some dialogue on how to move forward. I'll break it open by saying I had a very long conversation recently as I was doing some research for our conversation today with an alumni and student life staff member at my alma mater at Teal College. And I was asking her, trying to get information on, okay, what are universities doing now during this COVID season? You know, what are we doing with tours and applications and SAT test scores for students that haven't been able to take the test because the tests have been canceled up until now? And the biggest thing that she said to me was communication, communication, communication. If you're a senior or even a junior in high school and you want to go to college, you're looking at particular schools, she said the biggest thing that you can do is don't be polarized and don't be stuck thinking that you cannot access the school, that you cannot access the university, that you cannot access staff at the school. You have an opportunity, and actually she said a responsibility, to communicate what it is that you want and that you need for that school to help you with in this process. So I want to just kind of throw that out there. And whether it's a school or a further education after high school, or the military, or independent living, or entrepreneurship, the biggest key is to be an effective communicator and reach out, use technology, use whatever means necessary to get the information that you need so that you can move forward in the plan that you're strategizing and that you're implementing in your life, moving outside of high school and after high school. So again, that theme of communication, I think, is key. Once you've assessed and strategized and done all these things, you have to have the ability and the willingness and even the courage to communicate. And I'll say this, and then I'll open it up for conversation and dialogue. Find out what means of communication works best for you. I'm a talker. I know you probably couldn't tell, but I'm a talker. I can dialogue. I can talk to anyone, almost about anything, for any amount of time. And so that's a good tool. That's a skill that I have that I can use to communicate. Maybe that's not your strong suit. Maybe you're really good with technology. Maybe you want to send an email. Maybe you're sending something, you know, to, you're inboxing someone. Maybe whatever form of communication that works best for you, use it. And one of the things that she mentioned to me, the staff member at Teal College, was that schools and businesses and everyone in the community in the world today is more open to different varieties of communication than they've ever been. Since I can't come into your house or your office or your school, they're more willing to take a text message from a potential student. They're more willing to use social media outlets to communicate with students than they've ever been. So don't be afraid to use the medium of communication that works best for you. And then finally, this is my last finally, is if you're really good at in-person communication, you're gonna have to really stretch yourself to become more technologically savvy. Because again, whether it's universities and colleges, that they're still doing tours, but they're virtual tours online. They're still taking applications, but they're applications online. they're dialoguing and communicating with students and potential students in many different ways. So those are some things that I wanted to share in our dialogue, in our conversation today in relation to transition. This wasn't designed to be a very like technical, and we can do that around special education law and requirements. We can do that. But at the end of the day, I wanted us to have a base of, no matter what the principles are, no matter what the laws are, there are some things that we have to put in place to help ourselves to be successful moving forward. And so if there's any questions or dialogue, this would be a great time. Jessica, I think you have something you want to say.
Yes, Curtis, do you know, have you been able to find any of the information yet about SATs and ACTs? How is that working for our juniors and seniors that are trying to go into further education?
Yeah, so it varies actually around the country, to be honest, how things are working in relation to test scores. What I did find out is that hopefully some of the research I found is that testing dates and test sites will be opening up in June. Again, was a tentative dates that I saw for students, which is very late in the process for a student that may be a senior right now. What I also did find out, talking to a couple of different colleges and universities, is that many colleges are currently accepting students without test scores, and which is absolutely, again, very unusual, very different, or they're coming up with other metrics that they can, or assessment tools based on that particular university or college that may be used as entrance exams or means of assessing where a student's intellectual or academic prowess may be. So again, it's a variety of answers. Again, some of this as far as testing and some of the things I saw in Pennsylvania, they're looking to hopefully having rescheduling testing in late May, but more like June. And again, as we know, everything's pretty fluid with that. But one of the biggest things I did catch, again, as I mentioned, is that schools are looking at alternative assessment tools and even accepting students without those test scores right now.
So truly at this point, we're looking at some of these seniors that if they didn't get the opportunity to take their ACTs or their SATs, that they should still be looking at, if they wanted to go on to further education, they should be looking into it, because some of these schools are taking them with alternative education assessments to be looking at them, other than taking those tests, because that's really not an option right now. And then what about like the apprentices and the trades? Do we know what those ones are looking at right now?
So again, it varies depending on where. What we're finding now is that the trades and the process of becoming an apprentice, and that process is still pretty much intact, except for the in-person experiences. So there, many of the trade unions are still have their entrance process, their application process is still in place. Again, many of these have been adjusted to be online, but every, whether it be a school or university or even trade group, for lack of a better term, I'm having a bit of a brain freeze on the word, but they have their own system. And that's what's, I guess, one of the challenging pieces, is that there's no blueprint to be followed right now. It depends on what the trade is. And even with some of the construction, you know, there is some construction going on, but very little. And so it's very challenging to open up the trade unions for apprentices and new members when there's not work for current members. And so there is a slowed down process, but individuals who are interested can still apply. And this goes back to what I said, and this is the biggest, maybe one of the biggest underlying points that I want to share, is that it's important for students to communicate. If you're interested in the electrical trades, you have to reach out to folks in your area that are in the electrical trades, in the building trades, in the plumbing trade, and find out what their process is. Because depending on what, excuse me, what their workload is like, depending on what their process is, it will determine, again, how a student can reach out, how a student can go through their process. And again, everything is really fluid right now. So what I've found is that there are still applications that are being taken. There's still dialogue going on, but the individual is going to have to be proactive, much more proactive than maybe in the past. You're not seeing as many of the union trades coming out and doing a lot of the outreach as much, but they are still answering questions and dialoguing with those that are interested.
And I know that around here, all of our universities have pretty much started saying that they're not even allowing students to come back in, even for the summer classes.
Right.
Has it started to be released that any of our universities in the area, have you heard, are going to be allowing students to come back into classes in person? Or does it sound like right now most of those are still going to be an online kind of a study?
Right now, having talked to folks that, again, at Teal College, Gannon, Mercyhurst in our regional area, and knowing students personally who are in graduate level classes right now, and actually from undergrad, grad, and PhD, everything is still online. As of right now, I know this, they just finished the second or spring semester, is wrapping up for students right now. Excuse me. And I know multiple people who are taking summer classes. All of that is scheduled to stay as online learning for the foreseeable future. Excuse me. The moving into the fall semester, I think what I found, and just like many other businesses and companies in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in particular, are really following the direction of the governor's leadership as far as opening up the state again, making it okay for certain institutions to open their doors to gatherings. And I think it's going to be quite a while. I know that we're moving, and I'm not a COVID expert. Let me put the disclaimer out, not a COVID expert, but all the research that I've been looking at and articles I've been reading have absolutely been saying that it's going to be a little bit of a long haul, right? So we're going to be opening up some places, and businesses are going to be opening up slowly but surely and incremental, and depending on what service or need those businesses meet, they may be able to open up sooner or later than others. But the advice and the conventional wisdom seems to be to, even when things are open, to slowly progress into getting out. Slowly, don't have a mass exodus out of everybody's living room and house and apartment, and then actually make things 100 times worse than it was before we went in. And so I think, I know that with the educational institutions that I've talked to, they're going to be doing a slow process, even into the fall, of opening up their campuses to more traditional in the classroom meeting learning spaces.
Well, I appreciate you answering my questions. I know that this is different for all of us, and for anyone who does have a child in that area, that juniors, seniors, even those who have graduated in the last year or two that took a little bit of time off and is looking at now getting their child to help them to get into further education. So thank you for that.
No, yeah, absolutely. So even just in relation to going off to, college or that next level of education, I got this information, and the theme again was communication from each of the institutions that I spoke with, or representatives of those institutions I spoke with. Again, they are taking applications, but they're online for upcoming students. They are actually very much more open to social media platform communication. Most universities and institutions of higher learning have a Facebook page, have a Instagram page, have, of course, a website, where they're much more open to those forms of outreach and communication with students and potential students. If you're interested in a school, get on. Many of them, again, have their website and have a virtual tour on their website that a student can see some of the basic components of the campus and of the school, and what the school has to offer structurally and programmatically. Financial aid, continue to go through the process. put that, because that's all electronic now, right? So applications for financial aid. If you're a junior, you know, you still got time. This is again another thing that they were saying. Juniors still have time. Seniors are a little bit different perspective, and you know, students that have graduated and took some time off are in a little different perspective. The one thing that they mentioned in particular for seniors or students that have graduated and took some time off is it's a bit of a rush around scholarships. This is going to be a big deal for students in the financial aid that are seniors now, is really looking into scholarships that are out there, seeing if there's competitive scholarships, seeing if there are scholarships based on some maybe demographic that you are a part of, or some area or skill or area of study that you're interested in. So, you know, you got to kind of rush a little bit more if you're further along in the process, of course. But again, go through the process, ask the questions, send the text message, send the inbox on Facebook to the Facebook of that university, and they will get back to you. And you can also, again, set up tours. They have expanded virtual tours upon being able to, you know, set those up with students, right? Another thing is they are still willing to connect students, or potential students, excuse me, with alumni. And so what they're doing is, let's say if you're in Erie, which we are, and you'd like to go to Teal College, this is not a Teal commercial, but just a school outside of Erie, they are willing to connect you with alumni that are in your city. Now, maybe not saying going to be meeting at the coffee house because everything is closed, but they will give you the information where you can dialogue with them, and they will be able to give you advice or give you some direction or answer some questions about their experience at the university or the college as well. I'm sure many universities and educational institutions are doing similar things. So again, this is another push for the concept of communication and outreach and being deliberate and intentional in a way that you are comfortable to do that. So again, get out there. If you want it, go get it, ask the questions. My information, contact information is available with Wendi and the staff there at Mission Empower. You know, if I can be a resource or a connection in some way to a family or a student, absolutely let me know, reach out to me. It will be my pleasure to be helpful in that way. If there are other questions that folks get on, maybe if they watch this in an archived form and they have questions, my information is right there, and I'm available to do my best to answer the question. If I don't have an answer, I could probably find out someone who does have the answer. So, are there any other questions or even maybe other points that we want to hit on today?
Hey, do you happen to know, Mr. Jones, if the universities were extending their application dates? Because at my last known research, there was only 2 colleges, local, Clarion University and Mercyhurst University, that were still accepting applications according to their timeline. Mind you, that was probably pre-COVID.
Yep.
So I didn't know if you had heard from your contacts if they had extended application dates or not.
Yes, many of them have extended application dates, but I wouldn't wait on that. You know, it's still, to get the process in. But if you have kind of went beyond the application date that was traditionally maybe on a website, or maybe, you know, in your conventional information you got about a learning institution, most of them have extended those dates. But again, you got to go and ask and reach out to that school if it's Clarion, or if it's Edinburgh or Mercyhurst or Gannon or Penn State, whatever it may be. You have to take a little bit of effort, make a little bit of effort to find out what specifically is going on in that and with that university or that institution of higher learning. Another thing that just came to my mind that specific was a great point that I heard from one of the folks at one of the regional colleges, was that pay attention if you're reaching out to a business, a school, an institution of higher learning. Pay attention to how they interact with you while you're going through this non-traditional process. Meaning, some universities and colleges, the few that I mentioned, have said that they're willing to do this, a lot more non-traditional interacting with, again, social media platforms, etc. If they are not willing to be flexible to a potential incoming student, they're probably not going to be as flexible once you become a student, right? So kind of the DNA of the school, or the culture of the school, you can kind of get a feel for that right now through this process. So again, if they're very responsive through a myriad, or a variety, excuse me, of different communication resources, they're very responsive to you asking questions, and they answer them in a timely manner. Now, if they are doing those things to accommodate you and to support you and to supply the information that you need, more than likely, if you become a student there, that's the culture. And they're going to continue to be that way. It's going to be a student-friendly environment. And some of us, when I graduated, I needed that. When I went to college, I went to a small school, 1,100 students, which is a really small school, right? That was good for me. So I needed a school that was going to be responsive to my inquiries and to my needs and to my questions and my concerns. Some individuals, some students, they don't want that. They want that 1,200 students in a classroom, kind of environment, big citywide campus like a Penn State or an Ohio State, or something large and grandiose like that. So, during this time and you're reaching out, kind of get a feel for what the culture and the climate of that university is, if it's a school, if it's a trade school, because, it'll kind of give you an idea of what things could potentially be like if you become a part of that university or school or business family. So I wanted to throw that out there as well.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank you for your time, for coming on Wonderful Wednesdays with Wendi from Mission of Power, and sharing with us some information for our juniors and seniors. I think you gave them a lot to think about. I am going to put your information back up again one last time, and we're going to call this a wrap. Okay? Thank you for coming and sharing with us today.
Well, thank you, Wendi. Wonderful Wednesdays with Wendi. Thank you for the invite. Thank you, Jill, for what you're doing, through Mission Empower and helping families, and Jessica and Brittany and all the staff there, and folks that I don't know who are there anymore. I don't know who's all in the office, but Mission Empower does great work. It has for a long time, and I'm sure it will continue to do so. And I'm impressed at how how you as an organization have adjusted to continue to meet those needs. And anything I can do to be a part of that, I'm all in. So again, it was my pleasure, and look forward to communicating with you all soon.